Hey, for Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020, this is the Pro and the Con Show, and I'm your host, Michael James Ott. Well, welcome to the show, and as always, I'm always going to say this every show, encouraging all of us to be better citizens, right? And that means ferreting out the real information. That's the who, the what, the where, and the when. And, focusing on that as opposed to all of the commentary and opinion and stuff that's used to try to influence you. Just focus on the facts and decide for yourself. I'll trust you to do that. You can do it. Okay? Ferret out the truth. That is the pro and the con, the good and the bad, the for and against. Hence, the Pro and Con Show. Now, this is kind of a crazy time we're living in. People say that periodically. In my almost 60 years, I've heard people say that, adults in my lifetime. This is a crazy time. This is a pretty crazy time. Right now we have this global pandemic. It's still on the rise. Eventually, millions of people are going to die from this globally. It's clear to me that this is going to be a true fact. And it's causing a lot of suffering. And then, in parallel with that, in this country, and by some extension around the globe, there's a lot of unrest around racism, and rightly so. But I'm not going to talk about any of those things. In a crazy time, I want to tell you a little bit about my life, because who knows what's going to happen. And so I'll tell you, in case at some point you have to look at me and say, well, whether, is this a good guy or not? Maybe do I want him to have, to help lead this nation in some form, some area, or I just want, family, friends, anyone that might be interested to know a little bit about me. So in the last show, I covered, and it's interesting trying to cover a decade, hit the highlights. You want to say hit the highlights, right? In a 10-year span, and try to talk about it in 10 or 15 minutes. There you go. So last show was years 1 to 10. This show is years 11 to 20, okay, in my life. So here it is. So I've written down a few notes here. So at the beginning of that, when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, I was a really picky eater back in the day, okay? And I would sit there, and my parents had this stipulation that you had to clean your plate. We didn't have a lot of food. We didn't have a lot of money. And so, perfectly good food is there. You need to eat it. And especially things that were good for you, right? So vegetables and things, green peas, green beans, stuff like this. I was a very picky eater. I didn't want to eat them. So I'd sit there at the kitchen table, and we'd all sit and eat, and then everyone else would leave, and my parents would make me stay. And one of the things I didn't like at all was the crusts on sandwiches. There's a lot of kids that are that way. Now, these days, I love the crust on bread, but back in the day, I didn't like that. And so I would, I just would eat the sandwich fairly quickly, and then the crust would be sitting there. And my parents were, dead set that I was going to eat the crust. Well, and we had this little salt box house, and on the floor, so the kitchen, then there's this dining room, which only got used on like special occasions, holidays, and so on. And then there was a living room. And then a little corner of the house was the stairwell going upstairs. And so you had to walk through the living room, and right there, right as you come out outside the doorway of the kitchen into the dining room, there was a piano that my parents, even though we didn't have a lot of money again, they somehow, some way found the way to get an old upright piano for my oldest sister to take piano lessons. My oldest sister was very much into music, great voice and everything. I never got any of that gene pool stuff, but anyway, she was great. But they had this upright piano, and it was an old upright piano, and it had these wooden feet on it, or wooden rollers. Well, the wood in the rollers had long since dry rotted and busted off. So now there was just these metal prongs that held were holding the piano up. It was supposed to be rollers, but now just the prongs that used to have the wheels on there. And so the piano was almost virtually impossible to move. and it didn't move for years. And it occurred to me that there was just this narrow slot between the back of the piano and the wall. And so it occurred to me one night, I was just like, well, I'll just take care of these crusts. So my family had left. I grabbed the crusts and I put them in my left hand. As I went past, I did this little flick, and boom, they went behind the piano. And I went out into the living room, and my mother was like, you ate your crust? And I was like, yep. And she goes, no, you didn't. And I was like, because she knew. I mean, she knew us kids were always trying to get by with something. Yeah, I did. And so she goes out in the kitchen, and she's rummaging around out there looking into trash and da-da-da-da-da. And she comes back and goes, well, I guess he ate his crust. And so this became the norm. I would wait, and everyone would leave, and then I would grab the crust, and I would walk out there, flick. And I did this not for days, not for weeks, not for months, but for years, okay? From the time I was like 7 until around age 10 or 11. And I remember it was summertime, and it got to be May or something, and the weather is turning nice in Illinois. And so my mother, I remember hearing the conversation from somewhere else in the house. My dad's name was Bill. And I hear my mother say, Bill, we haven't moved that piano in years. I got to get behind there and clean behind that piano. Help me move it. And he's like, oh, because this is going to be almost a Herculean effort to get this thing to move. So I know they're going to kill me. And so I go to the front door, and I've got my hand on the knob on the front door because I'm going to run. I'm going to give them time to cool off, because they're going to figure out when they move that piano who's been throwing crust behind for, not weeks, not months, but years. So I got my hand on the knob, and and my father was groaning, and the claws on the bottom of this thing are digging across the floor as he moves it, and he gets the thing moved some, and there's silence, and then all of a sudden my mother goes, huh? And then she says, Bill, look what mice have done. Now I heard that, and I ran back into the dining room where my parents were standing, and I looked down and I said, wow, you're right, Mom. Look what the mice have done. And by virtue of reinforcing that initial opinion, she locked in on that, and my life was spared. Of course, they now know that story years later, but that was quite funny. And then in this period of time, we used to vacation. So I had a big family. As I said earlier, a lot of my older siblings were older, and they had gotten married and left, and it just left myself and my brother Kevin and my parents in the house. And about that time, we were getting a little bit more affluent, and so we could actually go on vacations. And so we would go to a place called Bad Lake, Minnesota, which is in western Minnesota. Nice town, nice lake up there. And there was these cabins on the lake, and we would go there every summer. And we had a good time, and blah, 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 blah. And there was, mosquitoes and things like that, the state bird of Minnesota, and on and on and on, lots of fishing and all that kind of stuff. I don't think, I'll tell this quick story. So my brother and I, of course, we, as brothers do, we would fight. We would fight, argue, fight. And my brother had been fighting with me over something or other. And we were out fishing, and we came back from fishing. My mother and my brother and I, we'd come back. And I was really mad at my brother because, I don't know, he had got me somehow, right? He got me. And so I was going to get back at him somehow. And it occurred to me, I'll run up to the cabin and I'll get a big pan of water and ice. And when he comes through the cabin door, I'll hit him right in the face with it. That'll get him. Because I don't know, maybe he'd been squirting me with squirt guns or whatever. I really don't know. But anyway, So I'm looking out through the window, and I can see my mother is behind my brother, and my brother's, quite a bit ahead of her, and he's running toward the hill up toward the cabin. So I'm like, okay, I step back and I'm ready. When that door comes flying open, I'm going to get him good. Well, something happened. My mother sent my brother, unbeknownst to me, on some errand, called him back and sent him somewhere. And so she was the one who came through that door. And of course, I was anxious to get him, whoever came through that, which was supposed to be my brother. Oh, Bush. And another instance where I'm pretty sure my mother's going to kill me. And I'm just like, oh, you're supposed to be Kevin. Oh my God, you're supposed to be Kevin. I'm so sorry. And she got, at first, she had this look on her face like she was going to kill me. And then I think the realization that I was being absolutely truthful and honest, that I was not, getting my mother with this ice water, I think that made all the difference. And she, clean up this mess or whatever, and she left it alone. And then high school, I hated high school. I'm just going to say a few words about it. There was lots of cliques and stuff like that. I went to this little tiny grade school, and then I went to quite a large high school in the town, the county seat. Much larger town, and the high school was relatively large, actually. I think we had about 2,000, a little bit less than 2,000 students. Maybe it's more like 1,600. But anyway, it was a fairly good-sized high school. And so I went, we came in from Grand Ridge, Illinois, into this big high school, and everybody, all the people from there already knew each other, had been going to grade school, middle school, and all that stuff. And so anyway, I hated it. I hated high school. I had a small cadre of friends, as I tend to do, and I just hated it. The whole cliques and all that. It's a terrible, terrible 4 years. But during that, as I was getting ready for summer, actually I'm going to skip that story because I don't have time. I see that I'm going to run out of time in my 15 minutes. So let's just skip to college. So at the end of high school, my oldest brother came to me and he said, what are you going to do? Well, my brothers were journeyman electricians, and I wanted to do that too. So I said, hey, if you'll help me, and back in the day, you had to have somebody sponsor you to get into the union. It's like, if you sponsor me, I'll join the union and be just like you guys. And he said, you don't want to do that. You'll be all busted up and broken. You're smart. You should go to college. Well, I'd done no college prep. Now, mind you, this is at the end of my senior year in high school, and I have done no college preparation whatsoever. So no applications to schools, on and on. So anyway, I arranged myself, because nobody in my family knew how to apply to college or anything. I arranged to take the ACT and the SAT, and I arranged to apply at the University of Illinois, which was the only school I figured I could afford. And I got accepted, but as you might imagine, I got accepted quite late. So I ended up going into a dorm, but the dorm was Newman Hall, was a Catholic dorm. And I had been raised as a Catholic, but had not really, participated in that religion to any extent since I was a young boy. But in any case, here we come, Newman Hall. And I remember, because I walk in there and I'm walking down the hallway, and it was a reasonable place. I mean, it was just fine, a normal dormitory kind of environment. But I remember walking down the hall, and there was this guy, and he's standing there in shorts, and he's leaning up against the door frame in his little dorm room. And this guy, he looks like he's like 50 years old. He's got black hair all over him, and he's actually starting to go a little bald on the top. And then, the normal stuff. Well, I was real quiet back then. I was really, really introverted. In fact, that's my normal thing, is to be introverted. And I'm doing these shows, and I'm talking to people, and I've talked to crowds of thousands of people, in fact. And so it's not a natural thing for me, but I've found that at times you have to do this kind of thing. And so I've, worked to try to be good at that kind of stuff. Well, introverted. And so for the first weeks that I was in school and at the dorm, all the dorm rooms are open and people would be talking, and these guys from the suburbs of Chicago, they would be in there telling stories and stuff. And I would just stand there in the doorway and listen to them talk and laugh at all their stories and jokes and stuff like that, because these are genuinely, entertaining people. And this went on for a couple of 3 weeks, and one of my best friends in the world now, he stopped at one point and he goes, "Hey, I don't mean to offend you or anything, but lots of people, you come to our room all the time and you laugh and stuff like that. You look like you're a nice guy. You must have something to say, don't you?" And, I was like, I started talking a little bit about stuff, and I would start interjecting into their stories and things like that. And next thing you know, they were laughing at my stories because I have some funny stories. And so they became, at the end, well, they're in college. There's a handful of folks, they are and remain today some of the closest friends, some of the best friends I or really anyone has ever had. And so I can thank these people who, out of the kindness of their hearts, out of the goodness of their hearts, basically said, "Hey, we're here for you. We're here to listen to you. Please go ahead and talk. We're here for you." And they were, and they have been for decades since. All right, that's years 11 to 20 in 15 minutes. And this has been the Pro and Con Show. Until the next show, I'm Michael James Ott. Bye for now.